I'm someone who's trained and trains others in something called the adult attachment interview. Anybody coming in, often there is some biggish pot around relationship challenges, either in terms of early relationships with parents or ongoing difficulties either with romantic relationships, either starting them, holding them, finishing them in some way. So from that side, it is easy to use an attachment framework to help understand what's going on. And what this interview does is it opens it up and it puts on display where some of those pockets are. And it's because of that that I think it can save a huge amount of time in a psychotherapeutic treatment, because you're getting to some crux of the matter that otherwise you might be waiting for. It might come up, it might not come up. Our whole way of regulating feelings and thoughts is anchored in this attachment system. Can the child, or later the individual, turn to someone in times of distress? That being kind of the bottom line. If our attachment systems are satisfied, we're free to explore the environment. So that's why we see even within ourselves, if somebody close to us is sick, or there's a separation or a loss, really hard for us to concentrate on the usual things. And then we see that in children as well. You know, kids in foster care across the board often do very poorly, say, in some of the schooling that they have, even though we know that they're very, very bright. The attachment system has compromised their exploration system, right? Because the first step is survival, and that's what the attachment system can then offer. You first get some kind of orientation to the individual's childhood experience, where they grew up, who was around, did they have much contact with grandparents, so some kind of warming up scenario. And then a question that is meant to be somewhat unusual, which is to give me 5 adjectives or words that describe your earliest relationship, first with mother. You give the person a minute to think about them, and then you ask them why they chose the ones they did. And so what we're looking for here is very important in terms of the fit between the kind of overall semantic organization of one's thoughts and feelings with the episodes. So someone puts out there, it was warm, loving, protective, and then you say, okay, Elliot, when you described your earliest relationship with your mother as being one in which there was protection, or your mother was protective, do any memories or specific incidents come to mind? And for the individual who can't discern or just hears that, oh, this guy had a really loving mother, what we're looking for is something more specific. How was she protective towards you individually as the child? Is there, I don't know, I came home from school and she always had my favorite snack ready. We used to sit down together and talk about, friends or my homework, as compared to someone else who might say, oh, I used to go to the bottom of the garden and we had a shed there and I used to sit there and, figure things out on my own. And then there's a special question, which really surprises the unconscious, which goes like this. When you were upset as a child, what would you do? So again, we're looking for a fit. If you gave us these glowing adjectives and then when you're upset you were on your own, or talk to the dog, that's a mismatch. That if it really was as warm and loving, you're going to need some evidence for what you say. So the other hallmark of the whole interview is around coherence. Does your story feel believable? So we're not looking for pure fluency. Disfluencies happen to all of us in our speech, but they're often very telling where it is. Usually it's on the positive, right? Because they're wanting to paint a picture that sits very much better within them. You protect then the parent or the caregiver from that, because at some level you still need them. And
the thought of language spectrum disorder, or funding teacher training in smaller classes, perhaps, bowled over, or a friend in need is a friend indeed, look before you leap, any idiomatic twist where that language spectrum actually disables because of the need to isolate from that exploration. with the introduction or the ingress to cotism. We give away a great deal in exploration and nearness that you can't feel whenever war has enabled the faint, bleak abandon and destruction that places in the joy of a child monstrous disregard that takes no pity, realizing that war wouldn't place a soft toy next to any child as a thought of reproach, where the meagre silence beyond despair and the empty attune to cold, unexplained grasp or a buckled desire to leave uncaring of fear and no thought of tears or weeping, maybe a form of thought that you would recognize as hindrance to vision, purpose, and destiny. The maturational model, and recognizing where you would be best placed in education if your instincts and intelligence, saying instinct to me, lifetime of my life, and an introduction to what are higher instincts than perhaps the governance would place in education. Even this morning, looking at mRNA and having email after email opened, the 5 words that I thought were 9-carat gold chain, bicycle lamp, radio, tape recorder, and to some degree camera, and those a few of those interests still occupy me now, and being prevented from exploring all of that. Yeah, there is resentment, surely, but an offer of declarative and non-declarative even understanding some of semantics. It's work I was doing only last week, so finding a thread for myself at the same time as wondering where in the 4 minutes my own reactions in listening to Marshall Island, formal assessment, recovery, aftercare, follow-up, and portent from schedule, the POSIT support group, and any number of strengths that you might not inhibit if you consolidate through those strengths where you found that disregard of war, or even reciprocal role and satyr, dysfunctional dialogue, where you might not have proposed vignette as the outcome, but looking at the sunshine today, it can still be quite cold outside. It's the 29th of April 2024. Placed in the net of Institute, the comforting reminders of progress, like paintings, tables, electrical goods, sofas, armchairs, slippers, cool clothes, lamps, phones. This was done for money. While renouncing what threatening language and threatening behaviour might be with Williams syndrome or language spectrum disorder, that might be too sensitive. The age appropriate and love and support preschool speech might not have been present in that attachment order. Where I take attachment, I was asked to define the issues around the adverse childhood experience. Hello? Hello?
This is the Vodafone voicemail service for 07423601682. Please leave a message after the tone. Sorry, mailbox full. Please try.
When you're upset, you're on your own, or talk to the dog. That's a mismatch. That if it really was as warm and loving, you're going to need some evidence. Organization of one's thoughts and feelings with the episodes. So someone puts out there, it was warm, loving, protective, and then you say, okay, Elliot, when you described your earliest relationship with your mother as being one in which there was protection, or your mother was protective, do any memories or specific incidents come to mind? And for the individual who can't discern or just hears that, oh, this guy had a really loving mother, what we're looking for is something more specific. How is she protective towards you individually as the child? Is there, I don't know, I came home from school and she always had my favorite snack ready. We used to sit down together and talk about, friends or my homework, as compared to someone else who might say, oh, I used to go to the bottom of the garden and we had a shed there and I used to sit there and, figure things out on my own. And then there's a special question, which really surprises the unconscious, which goes like this. When you're upset as a child, what would you do? So again, we're looking for a fit. If you gave us these glowing adjectives, and then when you're upset, you're on your own, or talk to the dog, that's a mismatch. That if it really was as...
So the profound contact of 1973, and when you are upset, what truthfully caregiving or the people who are meant to love you, when they let you down, and that care is no longer, as I say, belittling as I am. All I've ever asked of anyone is their completeness. I had the humility, and with that humility, I may have learned something quite destructive as a child. So knowing that this abuse didn't exist in every relationship, but 1 in 5 of them are white males, and maybe 25%. What if it's 75% females that experience, and the goal is total language spectrum disorder purely because of an accretion that forms nihilism. Yeah, I can see that. But would you inform Paul of an increment to care of 3,000 viewers? Or would you privately push past him and try and harm?
For what you say. So the other hallmark of the whole interview is around coherence. Does your story feel believable? So we're not looking for pure fluency. Disfluencies happen to all of us in our speech, but they're often very telling where it is. Usually it's on the positive, right? Because they're wanting to paint a picture that sits very much better within them. You protect then the parent or the caregiver from that, because at some level you still need them. And it's too painful to then go to that place. So I must have done something wrong. I must have, seduced them, and that's why there was sexual abuse going on, or I provoked them. Any parent would do that if they had a child like me behaving in that way. But someone else could say mean and say, well, that's just how they were, and write them off in a very dismissing way. So both of those are high defenses. So the individual who chooses or says, I don't remember, is telling us something really important, right? So it could be that they really, really don't remember. They're not just saying they don't remember. They have the experience of nothing's coming up for me. But most often, from what we know about the way we work as humans, that's a defensive maneuver. Somewhere along the line, something happened so that it made sense for that individual to conserve their energy or to protect themselves from painful
Splitting,
feelings
yes, the
by
splitting,
not
self-defense mechanism.
And often those people, do fairly well in our society, but that is a dismissing.
Yes, the
They're dismissing
intelligence
some
is there.
important aspect of their
Yes,
experience.
I understand
And at some level,
that
that
everything.
costs you in terms of flexibility, for example, in terms of affect or feeling states, because you are partitioning or cutting off the full range. And that's where we get the mental ill health coming from. So the individual who says they don't remember, it might work for them. They might actually be a high enough functioning person in our society. But we would think that through a therapeutic treatment or intervention, we could expose or broaden their capacity. So we'll tell you something like, when you're upset as a child, what would you do? They often refer to the crying and the difficult behavior, and then often bring it to the present. Oh, and last week it was my birthday, and my mother couldn't even get it together to have
6 years old, 5 years old, 7
She
years
always does
old.
everything for my sin, and the anger, you see it in the words,
And the
as
shame,
compared to the dismissing, which is
worthlessness.
minimizing the affect. So a
It started
resistant,
somewhere.
anxious child looks quite angry, and it's kind of maximizing of affect. It's all out there. Often when they're most distressed, the parent is least likely to be able to be available to them to help them with that distress. But they do it enough that it gives a kid hope. The child who gets classified as avoidant, and they tend to have a parent who's dismissing. They're not here for me. I'm on my own. I'll take care of myself. So in terms of, again, if we go to defense mechanisms, so the avoidant child in the strained situation, parent leaves, they tend not to cry. And when parent comes back, they often crawl to the other side of the room to look for a toy and make it look like, I'm not bothered by the separation. But we know physiologically that if we take, say, a sample of their cortisol, it's high, right? So by 9 months, it's quite an amazing thing. By 9 months, 12 months of age, these babies have already learned how to show one thing on the outside, and yet internally, a very different set of experiences, right? Like, it's just not worth me displaying my distress. And then we also ask about losses, we ask about separation, and abuse, both physical and sexual, because we can't rate the degree to which someone's resolved any of those issues unless we know that they really happened. The piece that comes into the adult attachment interview that I think has, some of the most powerful therapeutic, the tool set, or gives us the most, are the two questions that are aimed at delivering something around reflective functioning. So one of them is, why do you think your parents behaved as they did during your childhood? And the second one is, do you think your childhood experiences have had a role to play in your adult personality? We're not looking for Pollyannish, leave it to Beaver kinds of families. We're looking for the person to be able to think and tell us about those experiences in a way that's coherent. So some of the most compelling, the highest reflective functioning scores we get are for those individuals who've suffered adversity. Because it's kind of like that irritant in a pearl. There was something they needed to do to figure out relationships.
Thanks.
And then they can demonstrate that they've done that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I couldn't work this out anyway because you had the humility to be your mother's child, but when dealing with disappointment now, I don't want to trust no authoritarian. And being informal and moving from, to between things, because people talk normally, they're high functioning people. They say Condé Land mismanagement to me in the restaurant. They say we're not part of Madeline, a home office. They're functioning higher. They're authentic. Wherever this desire to manipulate or control began in Harrow in Christmas 2010. Authenticity, I can't understand if it was 2010 or 2015 because Eva was in the dream of Harrow. I get it.
At the new school has been going. You stand people in front of a mirror, you video film their responses, and you ask them what they see. Do you like what you're looking at? Do you like what you're wearing? If your mother was standing here, what would she say? If your father was standing here, what would he say? Do you feel the way you think about your body is influenced by mother, by father? So a whole set of questions. And we're looking importantly at both the verbal, the content, but the nonverbal as well. How they hold their body, facial expression, all of those parameters. And we did that alongside the adult attachment interview in our first study. If you were securely attached, you had a better representation of your body, you were more coherent, you had more positive representations for both mother and father, and a better overall body esteem. If you were avoidant, or in our dismissing classification for the adult attachment interview, your mirror interview conveyed that as well, and often quite superficial,
malingering,
not a lot of reflective functioning going on, and often an attempt to kind of live up to the ideals in our kind of cultural media society.
Without
also the same if you were preoccupied
the value of contributing or taking part.
Then we took those individuals and we put their toddler girls in front of the mirror. The first study was with just female toddlers, and we found a really interesting connection. If the mother was securely attached, the baby was able to look at their own image and look away. If the mother was dismissing on the adult attachment interview, the baby did not want to look at their own image. And if the mother was classified as preoccupied on the adult attachment interview or unresolved with regard to loss or trauma, the baby couldn't stop looking, as if they were looking for something in that image to connect with. The attachment interactions, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, build something that then gets internalized both in terms of expectations about relationships, but parts of the body that also take on some aspects of those relationships. We get people, for example, who say, yes, my mother always, encouraged me to be physical and, complimented my body. And they're standing there like this, holding themselves, right? So we're looking at that interplay between, what they say and other aspects. The whole field, I think, is beginning to take more of an appreciation to the way in which we represent our bodies and in connection to mental health and attachment. I think the piece with the body and how the clinicians move in treatment and how that blends with the verbal piece is going to be a huge kind of new opening. We're doing a little bit of work on that by coding clinicians' body.
What do you think? Any hints of anything? I know it's probably too early.
Well, I think there's something around the coalescing when there's coherence in what they say with how they're moved.
So race and substantiating race when faced with apostate glee, joy, delight, this, the epistemic value. Or when talking, you've seen Orna, you know what Orna's like. And you've heard the crowd around me talking about Orna and Paul, and then Paul and some Karen Webb, or Paul and Elvis at Beehive. And these are memories that I could never have accessed without listening more carefully. Right. And you might not be listening carefully enough. In the same way last week, yesterday I thought it was autumn, always autumn, and it wasn't. It's always moody something, and it wasn't. It's always 30 something, and still no signal, but I couldn't phone you. And I was saying, this is hugely important that I get a signal. At this point, I'm sitting there, somebody else is on the phone. Now I grow suspicious again, and start, well, not so much rejecting, but then Sienna last night, or on Saturday, was too difficult to accomplish. Infant Industries, and what even last night they're saying she's part of Beethoven. Nobody understands it. Why this attachment moves to Annunciation and apostolic birthing and transubstantiation, perdition, and is the English language or the scripture, does it prepare people in a way that eschatology and even ontology and the language exploration, answering, because communication, I've learned, communication is the key. And dysfunctional dialogue or being asked to portend form of thought where you don't listen carefully enough, you might have shut yourself off from that experience of the outside world anyway, purely because of pain that you can't recognize or you can't deal with, unexplained to you. Though there was nothing there for you when you were a child. Simple. There was no help there. There's none for other people, but I've got the book. I know there's 1.5 foot horses and little red dustpan and brush. So in functioning highly, take plants offline, strategic reserve, support market. Who had the highest output of oil? Venezuela, more than Saudi, more than Canada or Newfoundland, and regulating under whatever gross annual revenue with data control or data processing, a personal identifier when that's stolen from you, even as a body, quite a lot of credit to your account. And whether the BBC get nothing. But what Orna said was that Cynthia offering everyone an alarm in their homes when confronted about her father, when no one but Cynthia can ever fail to find that comfort and safety. These are where investing in an unfound or as yet to be experienced optimism could allow what had depressed you as a child with the humility to accept or even advise and advance with listening not only to your child but the grandchildren so much rejected to make your disappointment everyone else's disappointment or joy before you are allowed a cry or compassionate and humane provoking. What serves in Zara's mind, or Zara's grandfather, or the Princess Royal, a void expected by you and him. It's a void, isn't it? But an acute picture of many people missing no one.
People would do that if they knew that you're looking like, no, you wouldn't do that. No, I don't. No, listen, I think I'm very fair in relationships as well. As the mother of two boys, if they have a girlfriend, I think that if I feel that they are not behaving properly, I will side with the girlfriend. I've got friends who, they won't have a thing said about their son, and my son's always right. I'm not like that.
I just kind of things that I often relate to his sister. If one of his friends is doing something, dumped somebody by text, I go, how awful. I go, imagine someone did that to Rebecca.
Subtle. See, subtle. I like it.
Slip it in. Anyway, listen, time is gone. Yeah, I'm afraid we have to go. But I just want to say, yes, I know. Have you enjoyed it?
I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah, you didn't overshare, you didn't burp, and you didn't swear.
Well, I did do 3 times.
Tomorrow we're marking 1 year since Paul Bailey passed. His husband Andre.
For TV news,